The diplomatic cruiser of the Celestial Alliance drifted, surrounded by 12 colossal Maroth battlecruisers. Each warship, painted in crimson and edged with black metal, radiated menace, the curved hulls and spiked turrets symbols of ruthless efficiency. Inside the Alliance vessel, diplomats shifted uneasily, their faces lined with tension as they prepared to meet the leader of the galaxy's most feared armada. Ambassador Solarian Purdue's, a tall, slender man with a composed demeanor, stood at the head of the chamber. His silver hair was slicked back, his dark eyes reflecting the worry of those around him. Despite his outward calm, Purdue felt the weight of the responsibility pressing upon him, fully aware that his every word, every gesture, might decide the fate of the Celestial Alliance. The Alliance was a coalition of 12 planetary systems, each unique in culture and resources, yet united by one goal: survival. Now, with the Maroths circling them like predators, that goal had never seemed so fragile. The room was tense, diplomats murmuring softly among themselves as they waited for the view screen to connect them to the Maroth commander. Purdue cast a glance around the chamber, his eyes lingering on Lieutenant Cashin Hale, the representative from Rigel. Cashin, a recent addition to the Alliance and one of the few humans in their ranks, sat with his arms crossed, an expression of mild amusement playing on his face. Purdue wasn't sure what unnerved him more, the Maroth outside or Cashin's air of defiance. Cashin's reputation for challenging authority preceded him, and while that had won him admiration among his own people, Purdue feared it could lead to disaster here. A low hum filled the room as the view screen flickered, and the stern face of Commander Zorian came into view. His features were harsh, chiseled as if from stone, and his gaze was cold, almost lifeless, as it swept over the gathered diplomats. Zorian's dark, piercing eyes seemed to take in every detail, every nervous shift and hesitant breath, as if feeding off their fear. "Ambassador Purdue," Zorian greeted, his voice an icy rumble. "The Alliance has summoned us here, yet what I see before me is a room full of frightened, groveling negotiators. What could you possibly offer that would satisfy the Maroths?" Purdue took a deep breath, steadying himself before he stepped forward, his voice measured and respectful. "Commander Zorian, we of the Alliance value peace. We have come prepared to offer resources and territory, along with tributes worthy of your might. The Alliance is vast, with each system willing to give freely to maintain the balance of power." Zorian's mouth twisted in a slight sneer, his gaze narrowing as if Purdue's words had confirmed a suspicion. Around the chamber, diplomats shifted uncomfortably, watching with worry as Zorian's patience seemed to wane. One by one, the representatives of each planet began to present their offers: a fleet of warships, exclusive mineral rights to rich asteroid belts, and even populated territories ripe for exploitation. But as each tribute was laid before him, Zorian's expression grew colder. Cashin, watching from his seat at the far end of the table, couldn't help but roll his eyes. He knew fear when he saw it, knew the stench of desperation in each polished phrase and measured tribute. The Alliance diplomats seemed content to hand over everything to appease the Maroth, but Cashin's instincts rebelled at the thought of bending so easily. When it was finally his turn to speak, Cashin rose with a calm defiance that made the room go silent. He met Zorian's gaze unflinching. "With all due respect, Commander, why should we surrender anything to you?" Cashin's voice cut through the tension like a blade, his tone laced with a challenge that sent a ripple of shock through the room. "The Alliance is strong, capable of defending itself. Why should we give up our territories, our resources, without a fight?" For the first time, Zorian looked genuinely taken aback, his cold eyes fixed on Cashin with a mixture of irritation and intrigue, as though he had just encountered an unfamiliar species. Around the table, diplomats looked aghast, their eyes darting nervously between Cashin and the view screen. Purdue shifted, barely concealing his disapproval, but Cashin ignored him, his gaze locked on Zorian. "Tell me, Commander," Cashin continued, "why the Maroth, with all their power, continue to roam the galaxy, conquering and crushing every system in their path? Is it power you're after, or something more? A strange silence followed, Zorian's expression unreadable. Cashin's bold words hung in the air, and for a moment, it seemed as if even the Maroth commander himself was at a loss. Then, in a low voice that carried an edge of amusement, Zorian replied, "You speak with courage, Lieutenant. Perhaps I have misjudged the Alliance if they breed warriors such as you." Cashin smiled, his stance unwavering. "I don't speak for the Alliance. I speak for Rigel and for humanity. We don't bow easily, nor do we fear those who think themselves unstoppable." The room fell silent again, but this time the tension had shifted. Zorian regarded Cashin with a renewed interest, a spark of curiosity glinting in his eyes. Cashin's challenge had pierced through the formalities, tapping into something raw and unspoken between them, a need for a worthy adversary, a kindred fire. Ambassador Perduz, though inwardly seething, sensed the subtle shift in Zorian's demeanor. He knew that Cashin's audacity had, against all odds, stirred something within the Maroth commander. As Zorian's gaze lingered on Cashin, the possibility of a different outcome, one not marked by bloodshed and submission, began to take root. The view screen dimmed, Zorian's image vanishing as the connection closed, leaving the room bathed in silence. Every diplomat was frozen, caught between fear and astonishment, but Cashin simply resumed his seat, his expression calm, a faint smile on his lips. He had risked everything, but the first blow had landed, and as the diplomats began to murmur, still reeling from what they had witnessed, Cashin remained silent, knowing that the game had only just begun. Inside the diplomatic chamber, a stunned silence blanketed the room. The Alliance representatives sat rigidly in their seats, glancing at one another, unsure how to proceed after Cashin's open defiance. Ambassador Solarian Perduz, who had long prided himself on his ability to guide negotiations with measured diplomacy, was torn between frustration and a begrudging admiration for Cashin's boldness. Yet, he feared the consequences that might come of provoking the Maroth commander, Zorian, in such a way. Across the table, Cashin sat calmly, his expression impassive. The momentary ripple of shock his words had caused seemed to linger in the air, challenging anyone to question him. His stance, though at ease, radiated a fierce resolve that none of the others shared, a quiet but powerful refusal to kneel before the Maroth. Perduz regarded him with thinly veiled disapproval, but Cashin's gaze remained unwavering, unyielding, as if daring Perduz to try and silence him. "Lieutenant Hale," Perduz finally spoke, his voice low but tense. "You do understand the stakes here, don't you? We are balancing on the edge of survival. A single misstep could cost us all dearly." Cashin's expression softened, though only slightly. "I understand the stakes, Ambassador, but appeasing tyrants isn't survival, it's enslavement. What good is an alliance that cowers and sacrifices piece by piece just to prolong the inevitable?" Perduz's eyes hardened, his patience thinning. "You're a new addition to the Alliance, Lieutenant. With all due respect, perhaps you don't yet appreciate the precarious nature of galactic diplomacy. We are not all equipped to face the Maroth head-on, as you might think." "Perhaps we're more equipped than you realize," Cashin replied, his tone steady. "Strength doesn't come from endless submission. It comes from standing firm, from showing the Maroth that we won't be intimidated or bought with our own land and resources. They thrive on weakness, but if we show them something different..." Cashin let the sentence hang, his meaning clear. He wasn't advocating for recklessness, but for strength, resilience. To him, appeasement was a slow poison, a gradual erosion of everything the Alliance had fought to protect. Before Perduz could respond, the view screen blinked on once more. Commander Zorian's image reappeared, his expression unreadable as he studied the faces of those before him. His gaze landed on Cashin, and for a moment, his eyes narrowed in what could almost be considered amusement. "Lieutenant Cashin Hale," Zorian intoned, his voice deep and commanding. "The Alliance tells me they send their best diplomats, their most skilled negotiators, yet here you are, an upstart lieutenant, barely a year into your tenure with them. daring to defy me. Do you truly believe that your defiance matters? Cashin held Zorian's gaze, undeterred. I believe that someone needs to draw the line, to remind you that the galaxy won't just roll over for the Maroth. Maybe that won't be enough to change your mind, but at least it's the truth. The chamber fell silent once more as Zorian processed Cashin's words. There was no trace of fear or hesitation in Cashin's tone, and the Maroth commander seemed almost intrigued by this unexpected opposition. Purdue's watched in horrified fascination, wondering if the lieutenant's brazen stance would lead to the Alliance's ruin. You think your defiance is unique? Zorian sneered, though his tone lacked true anger. Many have tried to stand against us, hail, and many have fallen. What makes you think you are any different? Cashin leaned forward, his gaze sharpening. Because we won't fall in line with your vision of strength. We're not here to appease or yield. We're here because we believe in something greater than our own survival. And if you're as perceptive as I think you are, Commander, you'll understand that respect isn't won through submission. A subtle shift passed over Zorian's face, a flicker of something that might have been recognition, or perhaps even a grudging respect. Cashin's challenge was something new, a direct stand against the way the Maroth operated. Instead of groveling, here was a representative who dared to treat them as equals rather than oppressors, who spoke as though the Alliance's survival did not hinge on the Marotha's mercy. A small, tense smile played at the edge of Zorian's mouth. Very well, Lieutenant Hale. If the Alliance has someone willing to face us without bending or bowing, perhaps I have underestimated your people. But make no mistake, defiance alone does not equal strength. Cashin didn't flinch. Strength isn't defined by what you conquer. It's defined by what you protect. Purdue felt his breath catch as he listened to Cashin's words, watching the effect they had on Zorian. The Maroth commander leaned back slightly, his expression contemplative, as though reassessing the Alliance in light of this newfound resistance. The quiet tension that followed was palpable, the kind of stillness that seemed to resonate with unspoken possibility. Zorian regarded Cashin with a look that had shifted from initial disdain to something more complex, something almost respectful. Cashin had done more than simply refuse to appease. He had offered a vision of strength that the Maroth could recognize and perhaps even understand. At last, Zorian broke the silence, nodding almost imperceptibly. You have given me something to consider, Lieutenant Hale. The Maroth respects strength above all, but true strength. Perhaps it is more than simply conquest. His gaze swept over the Alliance representatives, landing back on Cashin. Let us continue, then, with new terms. With that, the view screen went dark again, and the chamber filled with murmurs of disbelief. Purdue, still recovering from the shock, turned to Cashin, a mixture of relief and awe in his eyes. You've done what none of us dared to, Lieutenant, he said, his tone both grateful and grudgingly respectful. But I warn you, this defiance may come with a heavy cost. Cashin's gaze was steady, unwavering. I'd rather pay the price for standing firm than live in fear of what we're unwilling to defend. His voice was low but resolute, his eyes flashing with an intensity that silenced any further objections. The diplomats exchanged glances, some clearly uncertain, others emboldened by Cashin's words. But one thing was clear to everyone in the room. The Maroth had seen something different, something that broke through their expectations. Cashin's defiance had opened the door to a new kind of dialogue, one built not on surrender, but on mutual recognition and respect. And as the Alliance representatives gathered their thoughts, the path ahead, though uncertain, now held a glimmer of hope they hadn't seen before. Without another word, Cashin stood and strode confidently from the room, leaving the others to reflect on what had just transpired and wonder what new opportunities lay within reach. Days passed, but the weight of Cashin's defiant stand lingered in the air, leaving an indelible mark on the Alliance. Rumors circulated among the representatives, each speculation adding more gravity to the Marotha's response. For the first time in their storied and fearsome history, the Maroth hadn't dismissed their adversaries with cold indifference. Instead, Commander Zorian had called for another audience with Cashin, this time on the Maroth flagship. The Alliance representatives viewed this invitation with caution, hesitating to send Cashin directly into the heart of Maratha's armada. Ambassador Solarian Purdue's, who had by now developed a grudging respect for Cashin's audacity, wrestled with the decision. He had always believed in the value of diplomacy as a tool of control, not confrontation. Cashin's approach was bold, to be sure, but Purdue's was deeply wary of how the Maroth might interpret this unorthodox display of strength. Ultimately, the decision fell to Cashin. If they wanted a fight, they would have engaged already, Cashin asserted calmly as he prepared for the journey. Commander Zorian is searching for something. Perhaps he doesn't even know what it is. But if there's a chance to shift the dynamic, we owe it to ourselves to find out. Purdue sighed, conceding. Then represent us well, Lieutenant. We may have earned his attention, but it's your presence that has kept his hand from closing. With an escort shuttle flanking his path, Cashin set out to the Maroth flagship, an imposing fortress that seemed to devour the starlight around it. As he approached, he felt the full weight of the Maratha's reputation pressing upon him, an awareness of the countless civilizations that had perished before their unstoppable advance. And yet, Cashin's resolve held firm. He wasn't here to plead. He was here to stand his ground. Upon docking, a Maroth officer, clad in stark black armor, escorted Cashin to the command deck. The Maroth crew members watched him closely, a mixture of hostility and curiosity in their expressions. Cashin noted their rigid discipline, their single-minded focus on duty, a stark contrast to the diversity of opinion that characterized the Alliance. In the Maroth, strength was not a suggestion but a mandate, and every gaze that met his silently demanded the same. Finally, Cashin entered the central chamber, where Commander Zorian awaited. Zorian rose, his stature imposing and his expression as cold and unreadable as ever. His gaze held a glint of calculation as he studied Cashin, as though weighing him against an invisible standard. "Lieutenant Hale," Zorian said, his voice low and formidable. "Few would willingly walk into the jaws of the beast. Yet here you stand, alone and unarmed, knowing fully well the history of those who have dared to confront us. Tell me, is this bravery or foolhardiness?" Cashin met Zorian's gaze without flinching. "Perhaps it's a bit of both, Commander. But I think we're both here because we recognize that there's more to strength than conquest alone. The Alliance doesn't seek conflict, but it also won't bow to an empire that would demand tribute and fear." Zorian's expression didn't soften, but a trace of something flickered across his face, perhaps a hint of admiration. He motioned for Cashin to join him at the strategic display console, where holographic representations of Alliance and Maroth territories hovered, bright and pulsing in the dim light of the room. "Your words suggest a willingness to fight, yet your Alliance offers only words and tribute," Zorian remarked. "But you bring a new sentiment, a resilience that defies our perception of your kind. This defiance intrigues me, Lieutenant, for it's rare that we encounter a force willing to meet us as equals rather than victims." Cashin's eyes narrowed as he studied the hologram, the expanding boundaries of Maroth influence stark against the colorful patches marking the Alliance territories. "You may call it defiance, Commander, but we call it survival. I think, in some ways, our goals align more than you might admit." Zorian's gaze sharpened. "How so?" "The Maroth could have swept across our systems by now," Cashin said, gesturing to the territories on the map. "But your expansion has slowed, perhaps because you're looking for something that strength alone can't achieve. You don't just want to rule, you want a purpose. And perhaps an adversary who challenges you in a way conquest alone can't." A silent pause filled the chamber as Zorian weighed Cashin's words, his expression inscrutable. "An intriguing theory, Lieutenant," he said at last, his voice quieter, more reflective. "It is true, the thrill of battle wanes when there are none who truly oppose us. An empire without worthy adversaries is no empire at all. It's a machine." For the first time, Cashin saw something vulnerable in Zorian's gaze, a hint of weariness beneath the layers of hardened resolve. The Maroth commander wasn't just leading an empire. He was shouldering the burden of its relentless advance, and perhaps feeling the emptiness that came with the lack of purpose beyond conquest. Cassian took a breath, sensing the gravity of the moment. Then perhaps there's a different way forward, not one built on surrender or submission, but on a mutual understanding. You want strength? We're prepared to meet you on equal footing. But the galaxy has more to offer than conflict. Together, we could create something stronger than either of us alone. Zorian's gaze softened, a hint of respect glinting in his cold eyes. You speak boldly, Lieutenant. I will consider your words carefully. He looked to the map, as though seeing it anew, contemplating the paths that lay ahead. Perhaps you're right. An alliance, one forged not in fear, but in strength, could offer the Maroth a legacy beyond conquest. The two stood in silence, the unspoken alliance coalescing between them, not in words or treaties, but in shared understanding. In this moment, the distance between them seemed to vanish, replaced by a recognition of shared purpose, a tentative alliance built on strength and mutual respect. Zorian extended his hand, his gaze steady. Lieutenant Cassian Hale, I offer you this, a chance to prove that your words hold true. Let our forces join to face a new threat together. Let us see if the alliance truly possesses the strength you claim. Cassian grasped Zorian's hand, feeling the cold steel of the Maroth leader's resolve meet his own. It was an alliance that defied history, a partnership forged in the unlikeliest of places. And as they stood together, bound by purpose rather than fear, a new path opened before them, a path neither had foreseen, yet both were ready to tread. The doors to the future lay open, and with a final nod of understanding, Cassian turned to leave, the weight of their alliance pulsing through him. The alliance in Maroth had begun a new chapter, one built not on surrender, but on a unity forged in shared vision and strength. And as Cassian returned to his ship, he knew that the galaxy would never be the same. The combined fleet of the Celestial Alliance and the Maroth drifted through the void of space, an alliance once thought impossible now forged by shared necessity. At the head of the formation was Cassian's vessel, flanked on either side by the Maroth flagship and Alliance cruisers. Tension crackled through the comm channels as officers from both sides coordinated their movements, their voices underscored by a unity laced with uncertainty. The unknown threat had emerged from the galaxy's outermost reaches, leaving a trail of destruction that had even caught the Maroth off guard. For the first time, both Alliance and Maroth were outmatched, forced into an uneasy collaboration against a power neither fully understood. Reports suggested a fleet of vessels, so vast they blocked out entire star clusters, wielding weaponry that defied known physics and annihilated worlds with chilling precision. In response, the Alliance and Maroth had pooled their collective might, binding themselves to the one goal that could unite them: survival. Cassian stood on the bridge, eyes focused on the distant stars ahead, where their shared enemy awaited. Zorian appeared on his view screen, his face still stony, though a new sense of purpose glimmered in his eyes. Lieutenant Hale, he intoned, our scouts report the enemy is holding position in the Hadran expanse, preparing for engagement. The intel suggests we are dealing with an armada larger than even the Maroth fleets. Cassian nodded, taking in the gravity of Zorian's words. If we're to stand a chance, we'll need to combine our strengths in ways we've never attempted before. The Alliance has the expertise in coordination and defensive tactics. The Marotha's offense is second to none. Together, we can create a formation that maximizes both. Zorian considered this, a glint of approval in his cold gaze. Then let it be known that today we stand as allies, each commanding the respect of the other. This enemy, whatever it may be, will know the combined fury of the Maroth and the Alliance. The fleet's combined command issued orders, weaving a complex web of tactical maneuvers. Maroth officers conferred with Alliance captains, adjusting their formations to create an adaptable shield wall, with the Maroth at the vanguard and the Alliance ready to bolster and support. Communications buzzed with updates, anticipation thickening as the two factions, once adversaries, prepared to face the unknown threat as one. The dark of space around them began to shift as a wall of shadows loomed into view. The enemy fleet, stretching far beyond what any of their sensors had registered. The sight was awe-inspiring and terrifying, a massive armada that moved as one, silent and unyielding. It was clear that this enemy was not interested in diplomacy or negotiations. It had one purpose: to consume and conquer, an implacable force of destruction. Cashin's gaze hardened as he relayed final orders to his crew. "We're not here to fight each other. Remember that we stand together, Alliance and Maroth, against a foe that has never known opposition. Our survival depends on it." The enemy armada surged forward, and a hail of energy blasts cut across the expanse between them, exploding in brilliant, violent displays of light. Maroth's ships led the charge, their crimson hulls gleaming with ferocity as they unleashed waves of plasma fire, battering the enemy's front lines. Alliance vessels moved in tandem, deploying shields and intercepting counterattacks, creating a seamless defense that allowed the Maroth to focus on offense without restraint. Cashin's heart pounded as his ship weaved through the chaos, his crew working in perfect unison with their Maroth counterparts. Each explosion and each defensive maneuver underscored the fragile yet powerful alliance they had forged, a unity that hadn't existed even hours before. They fought as one, each force lending its strengths to cover the other's weaknesses, creating a rhythm of attack and defense that held the enemy at bay. Through the thick of battle, Cashin's view screen flickered, and Zorian's face appeared once more, his voice steady but urgent. "The enemy is adapting too quickly. They are shifting tactics and attempting to divide our formation. We need a more aggressive stance to keep them from exploiting our defenses." Cashin nodded, signaling his crew. "Understood. We'll initiate a pincer maneuver. Let's trap them between our forces, compress their movements so they can't adapt as quickly." The fleet responded with precision, the Alliance ships flanking to close off escape routes, while Maroth warships pressed forward with renewed ferocity. The enemy's ships began to buckle, their rigid formations breaking as they struggled to respond to the overwhelming force. For the first time, the Alliance and Maroth sensed victory within reach, their combined might holding steady against an adversary that had once seemed invincible. As the enemy fleet began to splinter, Cashin felt a surge of hope. The cooperation between the two factions was holding, proving that their unity was not only effective but essential. In this alliance of unlikely partners, they had found a power greater than conquest or fear, a resilience born from purpose, and perhaps even trust. Finally, after hours of relentless battle, the enemy fleet began to retreat, vanishing into the dark reaches of space, their invincibility shattered. The Alliance and Maroth forces remained on alert, but it was clear they had won, if only for now. An exhausted cheer echoed through the Alliance channels, and even among the Maroth, a quiet pride settled as they acknowledged the hard-fought victory. Cashin exhaled, feeling the tension ease from his shoulders as he opened a channel to Zorian. "Commander, it seems we've earned this victory, not as Alliance or Maroth, but as something new, something stronger." Zorian's steely gaze softened just a fraction, and he inclined his head in acknowledgement. "Perhaps you are right, Lieutenant Hale. Today, we have shown the galaxy what true strength is. The strength to fight not just for ourselves, but for a shared future." Cashin knew their alliance was far from perfect. Differences and mistrust would likely simmer beneath the surface for years to come. Yet, he also knew that they had glimpsed something greater, something that transcended their previous conflicts. Together, they had faced an enemy far beyond any single force's ability to withstand, and in that struggle, they had forged a connection neither could deny. As the fleet regrouped, Cashin looked out at the stars, aware that the galaxy had shifted in ways he had never imagined. Their victory was not just against a common enemy, but over the boundaries they had drawn around themselves. The unknown now lay ahead, not as a threat, but as a promise. For the first time, Cashin believed that perhaps, just perhaps, the Maroth and the Alliance could face it together.